中文在2024年值得学习吗？接下来我会以我10多年学习这门语言的经验告诉你所有的优点和缺点。看完这个视频，你就会知道自己是否愿意投入时间来学习中文。Hi, I'm Neale. I lived in China for over a decade, speak Mandarin fluently, and created Mandarin Blueprint with my co-founder Crimmins to fix the broken Mandarin education system once and for all. Our online courses are helping thousands of members reach advanced Chinese in a fraction of the average time. So whether you just started out with Chinese, or you're thinking about starting, or you've been doing it for quite a while, and you're wondering whether it's worth pushing through your limits and breaking through to the next level, or just focusing on something else for a while, maybe switching languages or learning a different skill. So in terms of learning Chinese or not, a huge factor that helps people decide is the money thing that people talk about a lot when it comes to learning Chinese. Can you actually make more money learning Chinese or not? And if you can, how much more can you make, and is it worth it? Well, Mandarin Chinese will undoubtedly help you massively. Your resume will look a ton better if you have a fluent Mandarin speaker on it, whether your job directly requires it or not. By the way, more and more jobs in the West do require Chinese as a second language, but even if they don't, if you just say Mandarin Chinese fluent speaker on your resume, I mean, that makes you stand out. So an employer could look at your resume, and even if it's not directly related to the job, they could think, this person learned Chinese to a high level. That means they are special. That means they have self-discipline. That means they're smart. They're dynamic. So that alone is awesome. But I do want to point out something important when it comes to making money, because over my years in China, I have met people who've become very wealthy because of a direct result of their Chinese skill. And I've met people with awesome Chinese who never used it to make money. So it's about what you do with the skill. That's highly important. However, Chinese takes a long time. We'll get into exactly how long it takes depending on what methodology you use later on in the video. But generally speaking, yeah, it's a big skill. It takes time. And there are other skills that directly make you more money, that are directly more lucrative, such as learning about marketing, online marketing, sales, for example. These skills are far more lucrative with higher leverage on your ability to make money. But if you already want to learn Chinese, you have a passion or an interest in that language, you think it sounds cool, you want to be able to consume Chinese media, you want to be able to converse with Chinese people in your local community, or you want to go and live or work in China at some point, or maybe you have a Chinese spouse, or you will have a Chinese spouse at some point, maybe they're currently your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, then I highly recommend you do learn Chinese, because it will not only allow you to achieve those goals, it will also allow you to make more money for sure at the same time. That said, just like getting a degree in finance or pharmacy or marketing like I did, it's not particularly useful on its own, just learning Chinese or just learning pharmacy. You actually have to apply it in the real world. And in terms of supercharging your skill set, you want to learn Mandarin and apply it to other lucrative skills, specifically skills that China in general lacks. So, for example, things like international trade, the ability to connect China to other countries, such as if you're Spanish, then connecting China to Spain, improving international trade relations between the two countries. That doesn't mean working for the government on a high level. It could just mean literally reaching out to businesses and saying, hey, I can connect with you and this Chinese manufacturer that you're working with, and I could try and get a bit better deal for you. I can take a percentage of that deal. So that's just one example of potentially thousands of ways that you could make money, both in your career and in terms of being an entrepreneur or finding business opportunities, small or big. So just take myself, for example. When I was living in China over that decade, I had tons of business opportunities left and right, and I could have pursued them, but I was spending all my time on Mandarin Blueprint. I've had to refuse a lot of opportunities that do come up, and I'm not out there networking. One example relatively recently was a friend of ours, my son's friend at school, like their parents that we know well. They love tea. They're obsessed with tea. They have their own tea fields in a different part of the country, and they grow this very valuable, very delicious tea that they only sell domestically. And I asked them, why don't you sell this online, sell to maybe American people or English people, whatever? And they said, we don't know how. And I was just thinking, wow, I could, because I know a bit about online marketing, I could set up a website, I could take a cut of that, and I could help them sell their tea. I could translate everything. I could make a video. This guy is like a doctor. but he's also a tea fanatic, and you get him talking about tea and he's just obsessed. It's so charming, really. So I could have him speaking Chinese and I could translate everything and say, this is Dr. Yang or whatever, and he sells his tea. And this idea was just going off in my head, and I was like, but I can't because I'm working on Mandarin Blueprint. And these are just one of the many examples of business opportunities that come up all the time. So if you ever hear someone say, Chinese doesn't make you money, or that if you learn Chinese doesn't mean you're going to make more money, they are right and they're wrong. So you're right. If you just learn Chinese, you sit there and you learn how to read and understand and speak the language, you're right. You're not just going to magically make more money. Just like finishing a degree in marketing is not going to make you more money. But if you spend the time and take initiative on looking for a need for this skill, combining it with other powerful skills that you have or you can also quickly acquire, then you are potentially going to strike gold with this, because not only in terms of your career again, but also in terms of the entrepreneurial sort of business opportunities that are out there, if you take initiative, if you network. And that does not mean that you have to move to China. And you know what? It doesn't even mean you have to be that good at Chinese. You don't have to be like a master of Chinese and you know 20,000 words and you can speak with C2 level fluency. Not at all. Just basic fluency will get you very, very far. So a friend of ours, Scott, who is another fellow Brit who took Chinese to a very high level, but even before he was a high level Chinese speaker, he was around B2 fluency, he was speaking Mandarin on stage and he was presenting, doing hosting work, doing TV work, just basically any work he could take. And during those jobs, between those jobs, he would network. He started businesses on the side. He now has a suit business in Chengdu, in Sichuan province. And I sat down with him the other day and I asked him about this question about making money in China. And he said, once you've acquired a tool such as Chinese, it will take you on a roller coaster ride into a world you didn't even know existed. He said you can get into international trade, consultancy, helping Western companies navigate the Chinese market. And again, you don't need to be a Mandarin master and do not need to be located in China either, thanks to the wonders of the internet. And as kind of a business veteran in China, he gave me another piece of advice, which is if you are open-minded enough to adapt yourself to the way Chinese people do business and adapting yourself to Chinese culture, then as long as you show your attributes such as integrity, hard work, trustworthiness, which just like in the West is incredibly important in terms of doing business, coupled with your ability to communicate and also be adapted to the way Chinese people are and their behavior and sort of take that on as part of your own personality, then you will go far. They will remember you as someone very special because there simply just aren't that many people who have that skill set in China or outside of China. And that leads us nicely onto another reason why learning Chinese is absolutely worth it. And that is a far easier and more enriching travel experience. And that includes not just to China, but anywhere where there are Chinese speaking people, such as Taiwan, Singapore, Macau, Malaysia, Hong Kong, all kinds of places, as well as pretty much every major city in the Western world as well. There's a huge diaspora of Chinese people everywhere. If you speak Mandarin well, or relatively well, you will be able to travel independently when you're in these primarily Mandarin speaking places and have a far richer experience, I can tell you this. So even with my very basic ability in spoken Chinese when I was 19 years old, I went on my gap year for 2 months to China, and it was borderline magical experience for me because I had never spoken another language before. I was there, I'd probably done a listen repeat program for around about just 100 hours or so, just listen repeat for about half an hour a day in my preparation leading up for the few months leading up to this trip. And although there are far more foreigners speaking Chinese these days, it's not as sort of seen as much of a superpower, especially not in the major cities like Beijing and Shanghai and Chengdu anymore. But still, whether you go to Beijing or Shanghai or one of the less populated cities or in the countryside, more rural areas, especially once you get to the more rural areas where you are more reliant on speaking the language, then you will just have an absolutely magical time. Not only will you just be able to read the signs and buy things and not, effectively live your life and travel in the country without any trouble whatsoever, you will also be welcomed more warmly into the Chinese culture by Chinese people. And it's just an indescribable experience. So wherever you go, if you speak Chinese to a reasonably high level, you are going to unlock opportunities, just like you did with the business thing, with the making money thing. If you are traveling anywhere where there are Chinese people, you're going to meet people you never would have met, and you're going to be able to have opportunities for personal growth that you never would have had. You'll be able to go places that you would never have found out about. You'll be able to eat food that you never would have known about if you didn't have that language skill. And as soon as you speak even rudimentary Mandarin to a Chinese person, it develops this big, strong bond between you almost instantly. Their barriers come down and you have this amazing rapport. And this rapport will undoubtedly lead to opportunities for creation of lifelong memories, maybe even business opportunities and romantic interests too. Another big reason why learning Chinese is worth it is brain health, enhanced brain health. So learning a second language in general is good for your creativity, flexibility in thinking, as well as your memory and problem-solving skills. And apparently it also delays the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Lots of studies have shown this. So learning any language, great, but learning Chinese specifically also has been shown to have unique benefits. So it takes more brain power to speak Chinese, apparently due to the tonal aspect of Mandarin, at least from the perspective of a non-tonal native speaker. And it also uses both temporal lobes of the brain, whereas English uses only the left one. Reading and writing Chinese characters also improves spatial memory and is apparently the reason why Chinese people are so much better at mathematics than us. The math skills are kind of embedded in character writing because it involves skills such as counting, grouping, ordering, identifying similarities and differences between shapes. And native Chinese and English speakers treat numbers with different parts of the brain. And this shapes the way non-language related content is processed. Now, I can't tell you personally whether Chinese has improved my maths because it's always been terrible, pretty much. And I've never really tried to do much maths since I learned Chinese, I'll be honest with you. But I can confirm that reading and understanding Chinese does feel different, like I'm activating more of my brain. It's almost like if I haven't read Chinese for a while and I try and read it, it almost hurts. It's like after not working out for a while. I also feel that Chinese has given me like a new operating system, a way of looking at the world that's different, or a way of solving problems in a different way. And I've even noticed that I have different personality traits when I speak Chinese, just slightly, but there is a different Luke who speaks English and the one who speaks Chinese. That's maybe to do with the differences in humor. Of course, the cultural differences are massive. So I do act in very different ways. I speak in very different ways. I tell different jokes. I also laugh at different jokes. So that's a very unique experience for you to look forward to once you take this language to a reasonably high level. My next big reason why Chinese is worth it is the massive status boost that comes with it. So having a relatively rare skill such as fluent Mandarin massively boosts your social status. People see you as different, and in a good way. You stand out from the crowd and therefore become more attractive, more interesting, and just someone that turns heads and makes people think, this person is interesting, there's something going on, I want to find out more about this person. Knowing Mandarin shows that you understand Chinese culture, which can impress people. Learning Mandarin is seen as really difficult. It actually isn't crazy difficult. It's not particularly tough, more on this shortly, but people think it is. So being good at it shows that you are smart and hardworking. And when you're around Chinese people and have the chance to demonstrate your language ability, I don't want to say this, it does genuinely seem to leave non-native speakers who witness it in awe of you to some extent. Not ashamed to admit that I love that feeling, and I'm sure you will too. Personal growth is another major reason to learn Chinese. It is a challenge that you need to overcome. And it's not just one challenge, it's a long skill and it comes with a series of challenges. But if you overcome those and you change your brain to acquire this language, you reap massive rewards in terms of how you grow as a person. Let me tell you a personal example of this. So when I first came to China, I was a part-time English teacher, struggling to make rent. I smoked a lot. I drank way too much and too often. I exercised too little, I mean, not really at all, and was generally lost in life. My first year with Chinese was kind of a roller coaster ride. You know, I came to China wanting to learn Chinese. That was why I came, but I'd never learned another language to a high level before. I'd done some listen and repeat stuff, like I mentioned earlier, but I wanted to take it to a higher level. And I thought it was gonna be easy. Chinese was the one thing in terms of an intellectual pursuit that I actually tried at in my entire life. And in my first year, I spent at least 1,000 hours. You know, I was still working part-time, studying part-time, maybe a couple of hours a day. Spent about 1,000 hours, maybe 3 hours a day for the first year, and I got almost nowhere. And after those 1,000 hours, I maintained my motivation throughout. It was really exciting because I was also in China, living there. It was really fascinating, exciting time. But I'd gone to China to learn Chinese. And by the end of my first year, I was not even anywhere near fluent. I was barely conversational, despite all the time I'd put in. And it sucked. I had this quarter life crisis. I was about 24, 25 at the time. And it was a really dark time actually for me. And I had no excuses. I had tried and I had failed. But then I discovered how to acquire language, how to acquire Chinese specifically. And I started discovering new methods and creating my own approaches to the language. And then I was friends with Phil, my friend and co-founder of Mandarin Blueprint. And we studied together and we broke through and we made insane progress in our second year together. And after that second year, only working part-time, we had both got to B2 fluency and passed the HSK 6, the highest level exam at the time, in a quarter of the average time. It should take 4 years full time. So speaking Chinese well and understanding those squiggles, which I used to paint on my bedroom wall when I was a teenager, was a dream of mine. And I achieved this dream, and that gave me the confidence and the impetus to pursue other dreams. Another dream of mine was also to become an entrepreneur, and I did that. And I don't think I would have done it, at least not at that time. I may have put it off for many more years, or maybe never done it at all, if I hadn't have learned Chinese and achieved the personal growth that came with that. And I'm now truly a believer in that old adage, that sort of cliched saying of we can do anything we put our mind to. It isn't just some corny phrase to me anymore. It is 100% true. And I owe that to learning Chinese. Learning Chinese challenges you, tests your limits, and ultimately builds confidence and resilience. And that sense of accomplishment helps you realize what a learning machine you are. And it gives you the confidence to take on many more challenges in your life. Another cool benefit of speaking Chinese that totally makes it worthwhile, even on its own, forget all the other reasons, is gaining access to a whole new world of media. So even if you're living in, I don't know, the middle of Alaska or something, and you're thinking, well, I want to learn Chinese, I'm interested in it, but I'll never see a Chinese person as long as I live. That doesn't matter, because first off, you can always connect with people online, but you can find media online and enjoy that as well. So I'm talking about movies, TV shows, podcasts, books, comics. I'm a big comic fan. And everyone talks about how Chinese dramas are cheesy, but even the cheesy ones are addictive, and there are some good ones too. And there was a great period of Chinese movies. Currently, they're not that great anymore. There's still some good ones coming out, but just not as many as there used to be. The censorship has really cracked down in the last, decade or two. But there was like this golden age of Chinese cinema, and I hope that it's going to come back. There are some amazing films. Chinese content is incredibly educational as well. Obviously, they're not allowed to do anything, racy or anything or edgy at all, really. But there's tons of purely educational material. There's also a wealth of Western media that's been translated into Chinese, which you can also access. And it's just all out there, either free or very, very cheap to gain access to. You can go to YouTube, you can go to Youku, which is the Chinese TV media company, and there's tons of these different channels, or iQIYI as well. Again, you can access their YouTube channel. You can also go on Bilibili.com, which is like the Chinese YouTube, and just tons and tons and tons of material there. And by the way, consuming all this material, as well as being fun and interesting in and of itself, it's also the best way of getting better and better at the language. we're talking about immersion. If you immerse in Chinese through consumption of just fun media, you're going to learn all kinds of different words and phrases. You're going to acquire the grammar of the language naturally instead of trying to do it through a textbook. It is so much more fun and so much more effective. And for any of you out there who are especially busy, or if you're family men, family women, and you have that guilt that comes up whenever you want to turn on a video game or sit there and binge Netflix, you think, wow, I should be spending time growing my business or developing my career, reading a book, spending time with my kids, etc. Very good feeling to have, right? Trust me. But you can also, when it comes to immersing in Chinese stuff, because you're doing it for your direct benefit, it's directly benefiting your language ability, you can just consume this media almost guilt-free. So that is a huge bonus, and I know it was for me. When I was in my 20s, I didn't have that guilt, but once I started getting to 25, 30, 35, I started to have this switch that went on in my brain and said, you shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing other more valuable things. Well, now you can tell that part of your brain, say, hey, I am learning Chinese here, excuse me, I need to continue playing, Fallout 3 in Chinese, or I need to continue on my binge of this TV show, if you don't mind. And this leads nicely onto my final reason why Chinese is most likely very much worth you learning. And that is the fact that Mandarin fluency is easier, faster, and way more fun than you may think. So the traditional route is not particularly fun or easy, and it takes a very, very long time. I would say on average 3,500 to 5,000 hours for real fluency, B2 to C1 fluency going the traditional route. I'm talking like university or group classes, or textbooks, just following books and listening to teachers talk and taking notes and things like that. If you ever get to fluency, which I think a lot of people don't actually, through personal experience. I actually went to Sichuan University for a semester. Phil went there for an entire 3-year degree in Chinese in China in Sichuan University. And we can both attest to the fact that you don't really learn Chinese or acquire Chinese, you learn about it. You learn how to study it linguistically rather than actually produce and understand it fluently. And as well as the crazy amount of time that you need the traditional way, you're going to spend probably on average $10,000 to $20,000 to get to that goal. If you get there, which most people won't, but still, if you did do that, that's how much it will cost, we think, minimum. But if you do it the Mandarin Blueprint way, you're probably looking at on average around 1,000 hours. If you go through our courses, the Blueprint, and you learn characters that unlock words, and you learn words that unlock sentences, and you start getting comprehensible input early on, and it starts being very rewarding. That flywheel of Chinese, the momentum that you gain builds early and builds fast, and then you start immersing in real Chinese media every single day, and then you start reaching out to either native speakers on italki or just in your local community or free language exchanges, or just chatting to ChatGPT in order to activate the language. You will achieve fluency in a very relatively short amount of time, probably 800 to 1,500 hours, maybe 1,000 hours on average. And so it's doable in a year or two at 1 or 2 hours a day. And the whole time you have a clear path, and it's mostly fun and engaging and not boring or stressful. That feeling of, oh, is this actually working? All this time I'm spending clicking this button in this app or flicking through these textbook exercises, is it actually doing anything? You get that feeling of every minute I spend is actually working. So that makes the whole journey far more fun, so you can actually just enjoy the journey rather than stressing out about it. So you probably guessed just by looking at the thumbnail of this video that the answer for me is a resounding yes. It is worth learning Chinese, providing you learn it in the right way and it's aligned with your life goals. So if you're a beginner and you're ready to get started with Chinese, I highly recommend you check out this video next, and I'm going to teach you 99 must-know beginner phrases. See you there.